All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. I'm joined by an old friend, former member of the team. He's in town visiting some family here with his wife, has a baby on the way. Right before I introduce him, I'm going to shout out Vet Life. Vet Life is our sponsor that's been with us from the beginning. Pretty much everybody knows someone who went over into active duty military and had trouble transitioning back to normal civilian life. Vet Life is there to make that transition simple. Vet Life is a group of veterans for veterans, and they're a nonprofit based out of this community. If you want more information on Vet Life, please reach out to them on Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I'm joined by the one and only Cody Brundage today, husband to the infamous Amanda Bobby Cooper Brundage, a huge part of the history here at the Academy. Cody, let's kick this thing off. I'm going to assume that everybody that watches my podcast already knows you. But for the people that don't know you, let's take it back to the beginning real quick. Let's talk about what you were like when you were growing up. Did you grow up here in Michigan? And then we'll fast forward all the way to the point, when you became a mixed martial artist.
Yeah, so I grew up in South Carolina. I wrestled my whole life, and that kind of is what brought me to Michigan. I grew up in a super close family, huge family, 4 brothers and a sister, and super competitive always. So sports were always a huge thing in my life, probably the biggest motivator for me always. Even through school, I got good grades because I wanted to compete in sports. That was kind of the only reason that I was successful in school, I think, is because it was just necessary for me to compete. And then I had some success. I went to college in South Carolina. I qualified for the national tournament twice and came up just short of All-American status twice. I finished top 12 in the country. And then I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I had a degree in education. I knew that kind of wasn't the route that I wanted to go. At that point, I always say that's something that I might get back to eventually, but at the point I was in my life, I knew I wanted to coach. I wanted to continue to be active in the sport of wrestling. I wanted to fight. So I ended up getting a position at Olivet College in Michigan, a small D3 school. And then so as soon as I got here, I was looking for gyms to train at. And I think you were in Vegas my first time here because you had your Contender Series fight. So I'm and I didn't know this at the time. And now it's funny because being a fighter, you always get texts on the day of your fight and you're stop texting me this stupid stuff that doesn't matter. But I was blowing up your phone hey man, what kind of gear do I need to practice? You're bro, I'm in Vegas, leave me alone, basically, but you were professional about it. But I was why is this guy blowing me off? Little did I know you had the biggest fight of your life coming up. But yeah, I was yeah, I want to fight. And you're oh yeah, you want to fight? Just take your 3 free days and then we'll figure it out. And I'm no, I want to fight. And you're dude, leave me alone. So I started training here. When I first came here, people probably won't believe it, but I was super quiet, pretty reserved. I get along with most people, but I just was, when it's your first day in a new environment, in a new state, away from my family, I didn't really know anything other than wrestling and competing. So I was super quiet, super reserved, and that quickly changed as I slowly made my way onto the team and stuff. And so I finished out my year coaching at Olivet and decided that I was going to pursue fighting more full-time and put all my training towards that. Got a job, met my wife. A bunch happened once I got to SFS. My life kind of started to fall into place. But before that, it was a struggle. I was living out of my car for a while. I was living in a wrestling room office on a couch. My buddy Colin, who trained here as well, kind of took me into his house. And then, the rest is history. Kind of my life, like I said, fell into place as I started to grow and connect with people here.
So not to fast forward the story too much, but then you had an absolutely meteoric rise. You shot from being an unknown, who is this Cody Brundage guy making his MMA debut? Your debut was 13 seconds?
Yeah, 12 seconds.
I remember I was there ringside with you. You landed one right hand. I saw the guy wobble, and I'm he is out on his feet. You hit him a couple more times, fight was over. And instantly, I think me and many other people knew that a star was born that night. That first performance, we were okay, there's a gentleman here that has some incredible potential if we keep him on the right path. Mm-hmm. Now you shoot through the ranks quickly as an amateur. You do take 2 losses, but you were the guy that was always seeking extreme adversity. You weren't just saying, hey, get me intelligent fights, let me build up. I'm new to this sport. Even though I'm a high-level wrestler, I'm still new in the mixed martial arts world. You suffer your first loss as an amateur, and it was a fight that you were winning. You were dominating pretty well. What was that like? How was it like to bounce back from that? And then the second loss where you faced Dalton Rosta, who was another. I mean, you didn't come off a loss and say, hey, can you get me a couple fights to just get more cage time, let myself grow? You went right back to be like, who's the baddest dude in the country? And I'm going to show that I can compete with him. Let's first talk about the first time you experienced adversity in mixed martial arts after stomping a couple people. What was that like? How did that change you? And then we'll start to talk a little bit about your pro career, because up until your last fight, you were right back on that unstoppable, untouchable. You were one of the top prospects in the nation. You still are.
Right.
Everyone's talking about you, and that tends to create a lot of pressure.
Yeah, so like you said, I had a really successful amateur career. That first fight is a funny story. Before I fought, it was just me, you, Bobby, and Christy, I think, who were out there. And she told me, because she was in my corner, she's like, listen, you're just going to take him down, wrestle him, do not throw punches. Let's be smart. I'm like, I'm going to throw at least one punch. I'm not going to just take him down immediately. She's like, no, forget all that. You take him down, you win the fight. I'm like, whatever. So we go out there, I throw 1-2 and knocked him out. And I immediately was like, told you. But, I mean, luckiest 1-2 ever, but, that's my only I told you to Bobby since we've been together. So I was happy about that. But, so I took my first loss to Brian Battle. He was, I think, 6-1 or 7-1 at the time. I was 3-0, and I had no fights that were over a minute. So I didn't have a ton of cage experience. I had a lot of athletic experience, competitive experience, but I come out and I remember hurting him really bad in the first 30 seconds, and just like, okay, this is the same as it's always been. I'm going to finish this guy quick and show everybody that it doesn't matter who you are, whatever. I think I took the fight on like a week's notice too, which wasn't really a big deal because I was training all the time and always looking for fights. I was always in James' ear. It's still like all the way through my pro career was like, let's fight, and it drives people crazy, but that's just how I am. And so I took that loss, and I remember just feeling, I was really embarrassed, but I was also very, I was upset more that I felt like I let everybody's expectation down, which, like you said, we'll touch on in a little bit as in my pro career, but that's always been an issue for me. I've always felt like people want what's best for me. People put a lot of energy and time into me, and part of that is because I reciprocate. I put in the work. I work extremely hard. I'm respectful. I give, gratitude, I think, and I think that's part of how I was brought up, and that's awesome. But it's tough when you lose and all these people believe in you, and you want to prove them all right, because you do have haters. You have people that doubt you, and you want to prove them wrong. But more than anything, you want to prove the people that believe in you and are telling everybody off that they're right. And so it was tough to lose that fight. I think I turned right around and told James, like, hey, I want to fight this kid Dalton. And I told him this before, like maybe even before I took that loss. I said, there's this guy out in Ohio. He's one of the best guys. I want to fight him. He's undefeated as an amateur. He's finished everybody. That's who I want to fight. And so,
and I mean, to give perspective, he was undefeated in boxing. He was undefeated in mixed martial arts. He was a college wrestler. He's a freak specimen, and he was a weight class above you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I saw, actually, I was like, when I was looking at him, I'm like, this guy's the same guy as me, basically. I was like, we're running through everybody. We need to fight. And I was never one of these guys who's like, I want to go 20-0 as an amateur. That was never something that was a goal of mine. I was like, I want to fight the best guys. I want to have my hardest fights as an amateur so that when I go pro, I'm like, this is way easier than the fights that I've had, So, yeah, we end up getting that fight. We go out there, and it's a really close fight. I remember training. I mean, I always trained hard, but I remember, like, being dialed in super hard for this fight. Because it really, in my opinion, it was like national championship. I was like, whoever wins this fight's the best amateur in my weight. I mean, there were other good guys, but I was like, whoever wins this fight's the best guy at my weight. And I wanted to win it. I was like, heck yeah, I'm gonna smash this guy. And so we go out there, and I remember it being a super close fight. And then I got finished in the third round. I think it was like probably 1-1, and it came down to that last round, and I got finished. And the Brian Battle fight was tough to lose because it was anytime it's tough to lose, but I knew I was better than him. I knew I had a lapse. I didn't really perform the way I should. The Dalton Rosta fight was really tough because I felt like I performed very well, and I got finished. I'd never been finished before. And so that was tough to be like, wow, because our sport's not like basketball or football. Like, you lose a game, it sucks, and it's tough, and nothing to like diminish those sports, but you lose a fight, and it's the most embarrassing. People don't talk about it. They're like, oh, just fuel to the fire. That's what they say. And I say that. I'm like, oh, you just wait till the next one. But it's embarrassing. It's super embarrassing. And it, like, as a man, it's like, oh, I just lost in front of my girlfriend at the time, my coaches, my friends, like all these people who like count on me and believe in me. And Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I struggled with it, and then I come back. I took some time to train and then came back and got a win. But
Let's talk about during that process, because I think that's something that everybody goes through, and we're really going to touch into it when we get to the pro side. What created the change to get you back on track, or is it literally just getting back to doing the routine, getting back to work? What do you think it is that allowed you to let go of that shit, learn the lessons that were necessary, and really get back on track? Because after that, you went on a tear.
Yeah, I think it's your support system. I think it's very easy if you don't have a good support system to kind of fall off the track. And I've been fortunate my whole career. I've had a great support system. And I also think it's, what you're willing to focus on. And you get a little bit of fake it till you make it. I was back in the gym after I lost to Dalton probably the next day. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but I would assume, because that's how I've always been. But that's just faking it, because your first thought, as an amateur, it's different. You're an amateur competitor, but your first thought's like, what the hell am I doing? I got to get my shit figured out, and I got to get a real job, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. I got responsibilities, and if you don't have the right people around you and you're not willing to fake it a little bit, you're going to be in trouble. I think, you come to the gym, and it's tough because your ego's shaking, and you're like, I don't know if I'm the guy that I've been portraying. I've always portrayed myself as like, I'm that guy. I know everybody believes in me and they think I'm the next big prospect, but I've always thought that. And that's part of the reason people think that, is because that's who I portray, and that's what I really feel. So when you get proven to maybe that not be true, it shakes you a little bit, because there's one thing I've always tried to be my whole career, and that's genuine. And when you feel like maybe I'm not this person, maybe I'm not being genuine, it's tough if that's who you've based your whole person on. You know what I mean? So I think you got to be able to fake it a little bit, and you got to have the right people in your life, for sure. That's huge, because it's easy. I mean, this sport's not easy, and it's easy for people to be like, let's do something else. Let's figure a different path. Let's fight easier guys. Let's do this. There's a million other things that people can say instead of like, hey, we made a mistake here, but we're going to still get where we want to be.
And generally, your team will probably always be supportive, and the people that really care about you and know your passion are going to be supportive. But then you have family influence. You have maybe close friend influence that aren't tied into the sport. Fathers that might be saying,
absolutely,
hey, look, you took this loss.
Well, the closest people to you a lot of times are your biggest naysayers. And that's in all aspects of life. Like you trying to start a business, I'm sure. And it's not that they don't love you or they don't want what's best for you, but I'm sure your dad was like, "What are you doing? You're leaving this job, making good money and supporting yourself to go start a business that you don't know how it's going to be." And I've dealt with that my whole life. My family is super supportive. They love me. They want me to be successful, but sometimes their want for me to be successful, they don't see how I can be successful through this route. So it's tough for them to buy in. And a lot of times, this sport is such a foreign idea to people, they don't understand, well, I'm this close. Because everybody says I'm this close. But they don't understand, no, I'm really, this close. I'm, one win away. I'm one success away. I'm one fight falling through away from making it and providing for my family through this route. And so, that can really eat at you and make it tough to be successful sometimes. But if you know that going in, if you know it's not because they don't love you, it's not because they don't want you to be successful, it's just because they don't see it, and you can understand that, it makes it a little easier.
Yeah, that makes sense, because they're pushing limiting beliefs on you, but not because they have bad intentions. They just don't fully understand that, oh my God, my son is on the verge of being the guy on ESPN that I'm watching, coming home with a six-figure check to his family and really becoming somebody.
Absolutely.
And fighting doesn't just open the doors financially. Fighting makes you someone. You are known. You have many other opportunities because of that. You are treated differently in society then. Once you reach the ranks of becoming a UFC fighter, you are a different caliber of human being. So you're opening countless doors for your life and for your family and beyond just the cage, because sometimes people might be short-sighted and be like, oh, well, that's just going to be this tiny little window. You're transcending most people. You're taking mediocre and you're saying, I'm not that. I'm this level of human being.
And it's easy. I've told everyone, my biggest fear for the longest time has been living a life without passion. I'd rather not be here, and there's been times where I'm like, I don't want to be here because my life just felt empty. You're living this life that's fine, and I don't begrudge anyone who does live that life, because you make sacrifices, you got to do what you got to do. I understand that, but for me, it just seems like a slow death. I wasn't put on the earth to work and make money and just survive. Like, I want to do something with my life that for me, it could mean nothing to anyone else. But if it means something to me and I feel like I lived a life worth living or lived a life with passion and reached for my goals and tried to achieve my dreams, then I'll be happy. And I could be the poorest person in the world. I could be the richest person in the world. But if I didn't live a life that I'm satisfied with, then what's the point?
Man, that same energy flows through me, and it's been there since I was a kid. Like, if I'm not making some type of difference or living from my heart or spirit or whatever you'd want to call it, it's just, life means nothing to me then. It's weird how I can describe it like that, but it just, going through the motions does nothing to fulfill me if I'm not trying to create some form of greatness. I don't even know why. We're all heading to the same destination.
Absolutely.
But I am obsessed with this vision of, I have to create, I have to make something worthwhile. So let's talk a little bit about, now you become a pro. You smash your first couple pro opponents. You're back onto that meteoric rise. You're blowing through the ranks. Everybody's talking about you. Cody Brundage. I'm probably trying to keep you from going like, you know what, give me John Jones next. We're trying to keep everything leveraged out. When do you really start feeling that, you know what, I'm a pretty successful professional fighter now? And then let's start to talk about leading up to the biggest opportunity of your life, which is, you're at that point, you're 5-0 as a professional. You're about to fight for your UFC contender fight. I'm going to reveal this on the podcast, and Stacy will probably stab me, but like, I even put a lot of money on that fight because that's how much faith and confidence, like, everyone around you knows the skills that you possess. You know what I mean? They understand how talented you are. So I was on board 100%. You were on board. Bobby's on board. Everyone's like, okay, this is the time. Let's talk about, when did you start to feel like, I am a successful pro athlete? What were your thoughts and feelings like going into that fight with William Knight? And then let's talk about the outcome.
So I thought I was going to be successful before I made my pro debut. I saw how hard people worked, and I was fortunate enough that my circle, I was able to travel around the world. I was able to see the best fighters at the highest level, and I was able to train with them. I remember in Brazil, I was able to roll with guys like Chris Curtis, who had 30 pro fights, and I was like, I can do this. And I knew I could. I've always had the most confidence in the fact that I can outwork anybody. I've always believed that. It doesn't matter where I come in at. I know I can catch you. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm talented. People that I put stock in, people that I believe in, tell me I'm talented. I think I'm talented, and I'll outwork everyone. So those two things together, I'm like, I will be successful. I'll be successful in this sport. And I mean, it worked out for me. I worked really hard, and I took smart fights. But I mean, you remember, I think I was like 2-0. I'm like, hey, give me this guy who's now in the UFC. I mean, I won't say names on here, but you remember I was coming the who's who of the Midwest at the time. And you were like, well, let's be smart. It's not a talent thing. It's not a ability thing, but let's be smart. Opportunities will be there. You've only been, because a lot of people don't know, you see these guys that are amateurs for 3-4 years, and then they go pro. I was an amateur for 8 months, 9 months, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to go pro. I'm ready. I took my lumps as an amateur. I'm ready to go pro. And then fought for my first title a year into my career, amateur and pro. So I was like, ready to hit the ground running and get going and fight guys right away. And sometimes, because I was so successful and am so successful, I think it's easy for me to forget I've only been doing this, just now got to 3 years. This month, hit 3 years. I've only been competing for 3 years, and for me, I'm like, that's so long. But for people that are around the sport and know it very well, they're like, that's nothing. That's a puddle, You haven't been in it at all. And so I knew I'd be successful from the beginning, right? And then I won my first pro title, and I knew in that fight, because I'd smashed everybody pretty much up to that point, and I knew, and that was the first fight that I went 25 minutes. I faced a little adversity. I wasn't able to get him out quick. And while I wasn't extremely happy with my performance, it did more for me mentally and just being in the right mindset going forward than finishing that guy in 30 seconds, which I ended up finishing him in the first round, our next fight. But that 25-minute fight where I faced a little adversity showed me like, hey, this is tough. And not even just the fact that it took me that long to win, but the backlash from the state. And it was the first real like hate or negativity that I'd had directed at me my whole career. Because most of the time people are like, yeah, they want to jump on the bandwagon. People want to find a bandwagon and jump on it and say, I supported him from the beginning. But that was the first time people were really like, forget this guy. He's boring. He's a wrestler. And I had my close circle like, who cares? But you care. People say, I don't care what anyone says. You care. I don't care if you're Anthony Smith at the highest level or Cody Brundage in his third pro fight. You care what people think about you. That's just that's human nature. You want to be successful in other people's eyes, and you want to be exciting, and you want to be liked. That's just that's just how it is. So that was tough. And then I got that fight back with Eric. I remember I was so happy. Matt hit me up and was like, oh, this fight fell through, because he was supposed to fight Melvin Gillard. And I was like, okay, whatever, who cares? I was over it at that point. And then I get a text at work like, hey, Melvin's out. And he was just saying it. I'm like, okay, I'll fight him. I'll fight him on a week. I don't care. I'll fight him on a week's notice, whatever. I fought him, finished him in the first round, and kind of redeemed that for myself. But I knew mentally the fact that I was upset and wanted to redeem a win was going to be good for my career going forward, right? Like, everyone wants to rematch people they lose to, but I wanted to beat the guy who had given me my toughest fight. And I was like, most people don't want to do that. I felt good about my mentality at that point. And then, so I win that fight, and then COVID happens. Literally right after that. And yeah, I sat around for 7 months, which for me is crazy. I fought 5 times in 2019. I fought twice in 2020. And for me, I think that was really tough to be on the sideline. And I'm all for train, get better. I did all that. I was getting better. I'm still getting better. But it's tough when there's no end goal in sight. It's tough to train without, I'm training for this. I'm getting better for this. Because I've never been a guy that does okay, here's my specific game plan for a fight. I just train, I get better, and I'm like, if I show up, I'll beat the person. I've always felt that. I mean, when you get to the highest level, obviously things are different. You got to have specific game plans. You got to be smart. But at the point I'm at right now, I'm like, if I just show up and keep progressing and getting better and working hard, I'll beat 90% of the people that I'm going to fight right now. And I really believe that. So going in the William Knight fight, I trained super hard here all through COVID. I was fortunate. We did the shutdown for as long as we had to, but then you're like, okay, enough's enough. I'm going to reopen. A lot of people didn't have that opportunity. I got to keep training. I moved to Inglewood 8 weeks out, maybe 6 weeks out, and they were open. They kind of took the same stance you did, so I had full training all the way up, and I trained hard. It was the first time in my life that I was just training and wasn't working, and I was busting it. I was putting in probably 35, 40 hours a week of training. It was a full-time job, and I was eating right. I was doing everything I was supposed to do to be successful. And I had 0 doubts going into that fight. Like you said, you put a lot of money on it. A lot of people were in. I had no doubts. And I was nervous. I'm always a nervous fighter, but I had no doubts that this guy could not beat me anywhere. I knew I was a better wrestler. I knew I was a better athlete. I knew that he had a bunch of hype going into the fight. And I don't know if it was probably had to do with the people that were supporting me and people that were saying good things about me, but I went when that fight was announced from being a huge underdog to, by the time the fight comes around, to being the favorite. And I mean, like I said, there's a lot of reasons for that, but I was busting it, and I knew I'm going to smash this guy. There's no doubt in my mind. And the fight happens, and it went just like I thought it would. I'm smashing this guy.
I mean, you took him down in, I think, 12 seconds.
12 seconds.
I was watching it. Within 12 seconds, it was on the ground. I'm like, that's probably a wrap.
Yeah, I took his back, got Scorpion. I was like, this is it. And I saw that.
You didn't get Scorpion.
Didn't cross my feet.
Yeah, don't insult me there. I was crying in my hotel room because I'm going, if he does that, it's over.
Yeah, and so I'm seeing me sign the contract. And not only was I seeing me sign the contract, I was like, this is the best performance on Contender this year.
I ran through this guy. I haven't been touched. I'm about to finish him.
And I was like, I'm turning around quick. I'm making this money for this baby that's coming. My problems are solved. That's what you think. My problems are solved. I'm in the UFC. Money's no issue. Baby's coming. She's going to be supported. I got a lot of hype because I smashed this guy. And then all of a sudden, okay, I remember waking him up with shots. I'm hitting him, and he's going to sleep. And I hit him again. He wakes up. And I'm like, maybe I should stop hitting him. He's going to sleep. I think I stopped for 1 second to post out, traps my hands. Herb Dean says, you got to move. I'm going to stand you up. I try to move.
Which, first of all, is the dumbest thing I have ever heard of. I mean, I've seen some dumb shit from referees. Go back and watch Brundage versus Knight on the UFC Contender fight. Flattened out in back mount. You have a referee threatening stand the fight up. That is dumb as fuck.
Yeah, so super, and a lot of that's experience. Because I still don't have a ton of experience. That's probably the biggest hole in my game. But I was like, instead of sitting there and just, okay, I dare, stand it up then. I dare you, kind of attitude. I was like, okay. So I tried to pull him to back. to free my hands. As soon as I do, he's big, explosive, strong. He gets out. Good on him. And right there, I should have backed off, breathe, relax, do my thing. But in that moment, you don't think that, right? So I'm instantly like, okay, I took you down in 10 seconds. I'm going to take you down again, do the same thing. So I shoot in, get stuck in a bad spot, It was up at 205. The guy was big. Trying to get stuck underneath him is not a good plan, right? So I get hit with the elbow. And, a lot of people don't know, but I'm tough. You've seen me take some shots in here from guys that hit harder than him, hit Parisian, guys like that, and not even be phased. And so everyone's like, why didn't you move your head? I'm like, well, there was no need. I'm getting hit, but I'm like, I'm fine. And then it only takes one. So I eat one, and then that's when my legs, you see in the fight, kind of give. And then I don't remember much from there. Fight's over. And I remember just sitting there thinking, how? What just happened? And I remember I talked to my dad, and I was like, I've never experienced anything like it where the fight was 2 minutes, 45 seconds. You win 2 minutes and 40 seconds of the fight and lose the fight. And, that's kind of how vicious the game is. But, yeah, it was tough. It was really tough to deal with, and it was kind of feel like you blew your opportunity a little bit. And not to say I didn't think there'd be more opportunities, but it was just I've replayed that fight 100 times in my head, and I'm like, I just don't. It's tough. It's tough. I've watched it probably 50 times. I've replayed it 100 times, and it's you had, your life could have been this much different if at this point had you hit him 3-4 more times. It was that close, and it's and luckily I was back. I flew back. So the fight was Tuesday. I flew back on Wednesday. I was back in the gym on Thursday, working. But yeah, it's tough. Sometimes it's not, but you feel like that's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and you let it go, and then that's tough to come back from. But luckily, I got some other things I'm gonna keep working on, and I'm, like I said, I'm early in my career. My stock didn't fall too far with that, and I can still come back. But yeah, it's super tough, super tough.
I can tell your head's on right, though, because you're already saying, that's not my last opportunity. There's still plenty ahead. I'm going to get another shot. You've created good perspective.
That's the people in my life, though. Because I'll tell you what, as soon as that fight was over, a lot of people don't know this. I hit up Joe Fornicero, Brian's brother, and was like, hey, man, I got to get a job. And he just so happened to have, he was running the Midwestern stuff, so he had openings in Colorado. And, I need a job. Full-time job, and I remember talking about, he's like, all right, send me your resume. And I remember talking to Bobby. I'm like, hey, help me get my resume together. I got to send it to Joe. She's like, why? I'm like, I have to get a job. This baby's on the way. I got to cover these things. She's like, well, how are you going to train? I'm like, well, I might not be able to train for a little bit. And she immediately was like, well, pump the brakes. This isn't over. You're not done fighting because you took this loss. But people don't talk about that. Because in America, people want a Rocky story. People want you to be like, it's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you get hit and move forward. And that sounds awesome. That's great. That's great locker room material. But that's not real life sometimes. When you lose and you feel like you blew your biggest opportunity, you're like, I got to provide. And I have to do these things. And I might be miserable. I might not enjoy my life as much as if I was doing this. But it's just your responsibility to do this now. And sometimes you don't see another way. Sometimes you're like, this is the only way I have to do this. And that's why I said earlier, you got to have good people in your life. You'll make the Instagram post that everyone makes where you're like, I'm coming back, just wait. But you don't feel that. And I still, ego-wise, this sport, I don't have a huge ego. And that's been part of the reason I've been able to get a lot better. But you still have an ego. And you still have confidence. Excuse me. So I remember I was out for maybe a month afterwards. Because a lot of people don't know either. 2 weeks before that fight, I got dropped by Anthony Smith. He was training for his fight against Rakic, and I went to shoot. He landed a flush uppercut, dropped me 2 weeks before that fight. And I don't know I don't think it had anything to do with it. But then I go into that fight, and you get finished again. And this, for me, I'd never been hurt. I've never been wobbled ever. Never even people would tell me what it was like. I'm like, oh well, never been there, And that's not being cocky. That's just the way it was. I had a good chin. I felt good about my chin. So then you go from that to getting dropped once and then finished. And then 2 weeks later, I accepted a LFA main event. And then I shot in on one of my teammates, ate a hip to the head, and went fuzzy again. And I was like, what is going on? So you take that loss, then you take the head damage that I'd never experienced before, and you're like, maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe you just make up anything. Maybe I got a weak chin, and if you don't have good people in your life that kind of talk you off the ledge, it's easy to give up on yourself. And like, I'm not saying I would have, but it would have been easy. It wouldn't have been hard to do, to be like, this isn't working out. And like me and you had talked a lot about, like, you see guys who riding high and they take a loss and they're out. And I'd always told you, like, that would never be me. But, there was a time there where it could have been, if I didn't have the right support system in place, if I didn't have people that I trusted and believed in and have seen be successful say, like, you're going to be successful. Like, I remember you texted me right after and were like, listen, if there's anyone I'd bet on to come back and make it, it's you. And so I was like, all right, I got people still believe in me, but it is tough too. Like leading up that fight, I had so many interviews where I would watch my friends, like people that I've looked up to in the sport before they even knew who I was, like Anthony Smith or Dustin Jacoby, these guys, and they're like, listen, Cody Brundage is coming up and he's going to be a killer. He's going to be a superstar. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be a superstar. I'm going to be a killer. And then you go out there and you feel like, I just made those guys look like fools. And you didn't, but that's how you feel. And that's tough sometimes to deal with.
100%. You think then it sounds like Bobby, your wife, was a massive person in getting your head back on right, because she's the closest person to you in this world. She's the person whose voice matters to you the most. And if she would have had, a different perspective, there could have been a completely different Cody Brundage sitting here today that maybe would have just been reflecting on, well, you know what, I made a run at one point, than the man that sits here today that has worked through those things and gone into proper perspective. And then honestly, before the podcast, Bobby and I were talking that she's, going into sports psychology and helping athletes rearrange the mind. It's almost like you're a client of hers without meaning to be, because like together you two are working through these things that are extremely difficult. One thing that she brought up that is something we really should talk about, because not a lot of people do talk about, is that like coming up short thing in life. You know what I mean? You've talked to me about it before, that like, you were just short of your real goals in college wrestling in different points of your life. And then it is hard to get that psychology out of your mind, because like I've had the exact same things. I podiumed for the World Championship trials for ADCC, but I didn't take first. I fought for a world title for XFC in Brazil, but I didn't win the tournament. It's like every time I get to that moment that is supposed to push me over the edge and like maybe allow me to have that feeling of like I did it, I always fell short. And there's a strange psychology to that, because when I leave those performances, I know that I could have won. And I think that eats you alive more than if you gave your best and lost. I feel like you can sleep with that better. You know what I'm saying? Like when you go out and you got beat by somebody better than you, you can like close that chapter. But when you go out and you know that like I could have won this and I didn't, that's a difficult thing to deal with. Have you experienced that throughout your life of competitive sports?
Absolutely.
Let's talk.
So I took second in high school 3 times in wrestling.
Wow, I did not know that actually.
So I took second 3 times in high school. Then I was like, okay. And I was always like, I was pretty positive always. I've stayed pretty positive, which I'm proud of, because it's easy to be super negative. I mean, everyone has their moments, but I've stayed positive. So I took second 3 times, and I was like, okay.
Let's break that down a little bit. So after the first one, it probably did fuel you up. You probably went, you know what? I'm right there. Next year, I win this thing. I come in first. Mm-hmm. Now you take second again. Mm-hmm. What is that like? And then does your brain give you the same motivation? Like, okay, you know what? You learned from this mistake. Break that down a little bit.
Yeah, so it took second, and I was like, okay, well, here's how I can get better. I always was like, okay, I can get better. So I work all summer, train, take second again. I'm like, okay, I still got one more year, right? Like, I'm going to win it for sure. And then take second again. And then I'm like, okay, at that point, you're like, this just isn't working out. I'm struggling. What do I do? And then, so for me, to make it work, I'm like, I took second 3 times in high school because it set me up to have motivation and be successful in college. That's what I said. Because that's what I had to say. What else are you going to say? Well, you suck and you can't do it. That's not me. That's not what I'm going to say, or else I'll be super unsuccessful. So I did that 3 times, went to college, unrecruited, 0 scholarship money, was a walk-on basically onto my college team. We were pretty good at the time. We were top 10 every year. Took second in the country a couple times. Like, they were a powerhouse. I was like, okay, I want to start on this team. That was my goal. Not a great goal, but that was my goal. I want to be a starter on this team. It took me until my redshirt sophomore year, so my 3rd year in college, then I finally got to start. The day before the qualifying tournament for nationals, I'm ranked 7th in the country, I think. Top 10. Blew my knee out. Had to get the day before. They're like, hey, you're not going to this tournament anymore. This tournament you worked for your whole season, you're not going. And like, there was adversity that whole season. I started off the season at 197, was having a killer year. I think I was like 13-2, ranked top 10 in the country, was doing extremely well. We get a transfer in from Virginia Tech, my weight class. He's an absolute stud. Ended up taking second in the country that year. But he takes my spot. So my option is be a backup or go up and wrestle at heavyweight weighing 203 pounds. I'm going to wrestle heavyweight. I'm not going to sit on the bench. Work my way up to heavyweight. Ended up putting on like 15 pounds because I wanted to wrestle. Way too big for my frame. That's why I blew my knee out. But I was like, okay, I'll push through it. I'll wrestle. Blow my knee out completely. Get pulled from the tournament to qualify. That was my redshirt sophomore year. So I had 2 more years of college. I'm like, okay, whatever. It was supposed to be an 8-month recovery. I was back on the mats in 3 months. I was like, I'm going to wrestle, keep getting better. Then the next year, I took round of 12, which is the blood round, if anyone knows. It's the round before you become an All-American. So just short. I was like, okay. Sucks, but once again, this will propel me to next year. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it happen. Same thing happens the next year. I'm like, I lost in overtime to be an All-American to the returning national finalist. I'm like, this is okay. Okay, so I'm pretty emotional. I'm pretty upset, and I'm like, geez, like I just can't catch a break. And it's tough because that's how you feel. And you're starting to get where you can be super negative. You can be really negative.
Do you notice any common denominators? Like, would you say in those matches where it was like right at that point where you were going to break through, did you give your best performance out there? Was there something mentally that held you back? Was there a certain ability for your brain to allow yourself to not?
I think it happened before. I think being a small town kid who didn't have any expectations from anyone other than himself allowed me to be okay with round of 12 is really good. And that wasn't the main voice. The main voice was like, you need to be an All-American. But there's a small voice like, hey, if you don't All-American, you still did really good. You still far exceeded everyone's expectations. And so that allowed me, I think, maybe, not that I didn't give my best performance, but that was a cop-out before I even started. And it's hard to be successful when you have that, And so then round of 12, my senior year, I did an All-American. It's hard, but I'm like, okay, well, this is going to propel me to the next thing. Fast forward to losing to William Knight on Contender Series. It's like, maybe I'm just the guy who's just short. That's the other thought. And that still runs through my mind now. I think I'm going to be successful. I think I told you a long time, my goal isn't to make it to the UFC. To me, whether it is or not, to me, I'm like, that's a foregone conclusion. I'm making it to the UFC. I want to be a top 10 fighter in the world. I want to provide for my family. I want to be able to do things that we talked about a long time ago, so, but yeah, it definitely messes with you. I'm the guy that's always just short. I'm the guy that makes it and gives a good showing but doesn't make it happen. I'm not getting killed. I'm not getting blown out of the water, but I'm just not quite good enough. And that's something you deal with every day. I deal with that every single day that I'm competing.
That's a conversation that I haven't had with many people, but when you the way you said it right there is the most perfect description that I could have given it. There's almost a certain part of your psychology that's like, hey, you got enough. Be proud of this. And it's like you almost have to work to wash that out. Because it's not good enough. The only thing that really is good enough is your absolute best to find out what you could have been. Because I've experienced those exact same moments. I remember vividly when I walked out on the mat for the match that was going to put me into the World Championship qualifier finals, right? So I was going to be the representative for the United States of America for ADCCs for jiu-jitsu at my weight class. Unfucking believable from being a self-taught kid that was supposed to be nobody. You know what I mean? I think it reflects back to that. The only person that ever had big expectations for myself in this life was me. I would look in the mirror and be like, you're fucking capable of things. It doesn't matter what people say. You're going to do shit, which is probably why all of this exists today, right? Mm-hmm. But, beyond that, I feel like within my own psychology, there's a certain limiting belief that I haven't been able to fully fix where when I get to a certain level, my brain goes yeah, give your best. Hopefully you win and, you're going to win. Don't worry about it. But if you don't.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Yeah.
And it's, what? In my spirit, it's not all right.
Right.
So you almost have to find a way to have that honest conversation up front. No, it's not all right.
You gotta quiet the bitch.
100%.
Sometimes it's hard to quiet the bitch.
Yeah, dude. Because I've experienced it. I remember when I walked out to that final fight in Brazil, the first fight, I didn't have a second of. When I went down to Brazil, it was not going to. I was fighting the number 1 seed the first round. But I didn't have a moment of thought of, if I lose to this guy, at least I came down to Brazil. That thought didn't cross my brain. It was do or die. You are going to beat this man across from you. You better kill me in that ring or I will beat you.
It's the craziest thing that I feel like I say quiet the bitch, but I've had moments where like, and it's different. There's like different voices. Because like before I fought Michael Johnson, you remember this, in Detroit, I was like freaking out backstage. Probably the most, I'm always nervous, but it's the most nervous you ever seen me. I'm throwing up. I'm like, this guy's going to beat my ass. And that's a bitch that you hear in your head. You're like, oh, this guy's going to kick my ass. But that's a different one. That's a different one than it's okay if you lose. It's okay to not be successful right here because you've been so successful.
Hey, you're already
before.
Successful.
Yeah, and that is a killer. It'll kill you. It'll ruin pretty much every opportunity you have if that is your attitude. And I've noticed that in wrestling, in life. You know, it's okay if you don't get this job. It's okay because you've gotten other really good jobs before. You've done pretty good for a 26-year-old. You've done, and it's tough. And the thing that was really tough was when I was just having my own expectations, college and high school. You know, I didn't have a lot of people that were like, this kid's going to be something special. But me and my family, they're like, you could be special. You know, and I was like, I'm going to be special. I know it. I'm going to be something that these guys have never seen. They never seen somebody come from nothing like me and turn into something. And I knew that. But when I got to MMA, it wasn't like that anymore. It wasn't just Cody Brundage believing in Cody Brundage. I have the best guys in the world who believe that I'm going to be good. And so it was tough to still have that thought. Because you think when everyone in the world's like, you're going to be special, you're going to be something really good, you know, that voice of, oh, it's okay, you're successful will go away. But it doesn't. Because it's still there. And if it did, you know, if it worked like it was supposed to, it would go away and be like, you're not as successful as people think you're going to be, so you got to make this happen. But it's still there.
And, if anything, it almost compounds the stress because now it's not only your own expectations. You don't want to let people down.
Exactly.
And you want to become the embodiment of what people believe you to be. You know what I mean? You want to rise to that occasion.
You want to make your friends look smart. You want to make your coach look smart for putting big money on you. You want to make all that stuff pay out. And there's a lot of pressure. And, you know, normally I've been pretty good about embracing the pressure because I will say, I feel like throughout my whole MMA career, there's been pressure. I don't think for 1 minute people were like,
because everyone knew how good you had the potential to become.
Which I'd rather have that pressure. I've said that before. I'd rather have the pressure of this guy's going to be really successful, and if he's not, it's a letdown than, oh my God, I can't believe that guy's really successful. But it is it's tough to deal with sometimes when you don't feel like you're meeting that expectation. You know, it's easy to kind of get really down on yourself when you don't feel like you're meeting the expectation. And then the other thing is, you know, when I first moved out to Factory X, I was getting crushed all the time. Those guys were killing me, and I'd never experienced that before. And then I would slowly get better, but I was still getting crushed, and I remember like, dude, I'm not good. And it wasn't that I'm not good. It's that these guys are really good, and they have a system. They've been, you know, they're waiting for someone to come in to take out their frustrations on because they're getting whooped every week. You know, so I was getting my lumps I still take my lumps there, but, you know, obviously gotten a lot better. But the biggest thing was, I remember Mark Montoya told me, he said, you got to stop comparing yourself because comparison is the thief of joy. That's what he said. He said, you compare yourself. You never compared yourself to someone that you're whooping. You never compare yourself to someone that you're doing way better than. You're comparing yourself to people that are doing better than you right now, and it's making you feel like you're not worth a damn. And it's making you feel like I can't get there. I can't make it. And so when I turned that off, it helped a lot to be like, okay, I'm getting better. Cody Brundage is better than he was. Cody Brundage is continuing to get better, and Cody Brundage is better than most people. You know, I'm better than most people, so if I continue to just be a better Cody Brundage, then I'm going to beat most people, you know. But, yeah, it's a struggle, and, you know, the thing is, like, I've always struggled with, like, the mental side of things. Physical's never been a real big struggle for me. It just hasn't. I'm gifted athletically. I pick up on things very quick, but mental is always tough, and it's like and I think some people are just wired different. Some people have to work at it harder because there's some people that are like, I won't lose, and they believe that with all their heart, and they don't have that voice in the back of their head that's like, it's okay. They just have this steadfast belief of like, I can't lose. Like Chaos Williams, I feel like, is that way. I'm not going to lose. I'm going to knock everyone out, and that's how it's going. And that's awesome. And I'm envious of people like that. To me, it's like people that are very religious, like people that can just, without question, have faith. And I'm not one of those people. I've tried to be. My family was religious growing up. I've tried to be one of those people. But to me, I just never, my brain could never work through that. I was always very curious and questioning, and that's not how you're supposed to be. You're supposed to just have this faith. And I couldn't. And I'm envious of people that can. But it's like people are like, well, you just got to work on the mental game. I'm like, it's not that easy. You got to tune out the negative thoughts. It's not. If it was that easy, I'd be a pro at it.
Tends to be the more you analyze things, the more complicated it gets, because now you're overanalyzing every bit of your psychology. And whereas almost the ignorance is bliss type deal, where they're just like, oh, it's going to work out.
Yeah.
And you're like, how's it going to work out?
And I've noticed, like in my career, my best fights are like, okay, we took a fight on 4 days' notice because I didn't have time to think about it. I'm like, I'm going to make weight and I'm going to fight this guy. And then I won. But a lot of times, like when you're like, okay, I got 6 months to think about this person and everything they can do to me and everything I can do to them and what's on the line and who's depending on me to get this win.
And nobody really knows, because the mind is an intangible. You know what I mean? Like, there's different methods out there. Like, I mean, let's take Mike Moore for an example. A lot of the things he says, I mean, he uses basic psychology principles that try to steer people into having healthier minds. But with that being said, like, when you spout things like, I have no fear of losing or making mistakes. If you're a gifted athlete that wants to be successful, of course you have fear of losing a match or making mistakes.
And I've done those courses. Like, I've did the courses, and they helped a lot.
Hands down.
They were very helpful, right? But nothing is foolproof, right?
No.
Like, nothing is always. And I get that. Like, if you keep repeating it, it helps, right?
You're
like
trying to get your brain to get onto that
method.
method. Yes.
But, it's tough. It's not easy. And the thing that people don't talk about is, like, even when you're doing that, a loss can shatter it instantly.
Because let's say you walked out to the ring, like you said, with William Knight, and you were like, I'm going to smash this guy. There's nothing he can do to stop me. I'm going to be victorious in this match. And then when it doesn't work out, you have to go back to the drawing board and say, it's like, as humans, we always want to see where it went wrong, when sometimes there's just not a certain piece that you can say, this is what I did wrong, or this is what I should have done.
Yeah, I think it's almost, you got to realize that maybe it doesn't matter. And I've struggled with that a lot, but maybe it doesn't matter how you feel. Because I felt terrible. I felt like I was coming off a honeymoon. I didn't train like I should have trained. I'm getting so nervous before this fight. This guy can beat me up. This guy can do whatever. And I've won. And then I felt like this guy can't hold my jock at all. There's no way he's stopping me from getting where I want to be. And not only is he not stopping me from getting where I want to be, I'm going to beat him so fast that I'm going to turn around in 2 weeks and beat another guy. And that's how I felt going into William Knight. I'm like, not only am I going to smash this guy, I'm not going to get touched, and I'm going to say, I want to fight tomorrow. I want to fight next Saturday. And then you lose. And it's tough to think that, because you want to think it all matters. Everything matters. All the work I put in matters. All the mental training I did matters. And to a point, it does. I'm not saying you come off the couch and beat the best guys in the world, but also to a point, it doesn't. Especially with this sport. Because this sport is a game of inches. This sport is unforgiving. You get hit the wrong way, it's over. And you could be dominating the whole fight for 14 minutes and 59 seconds and get knocked out, and guess what? You lost. And it's so, I think if you understand that going into it, it's always like what Nate and Nick Diaz say. They're like, this guy could really mess me up. He could dominate me. He could beat my ass, and that's just something that could happen. And if you're okay with that, then when it happens, it's like, okay, well, I knew that was a possibility, right? And you can be okay with it, and it cannot be as big a setback. Or if it's happening in the fight, you're like, well, I knew this was a possibility. You can come back from it. But something I've been working on, because I always ride like really low or really high. It's like, for instance, if you're riding really high, I'm going to kill this guy. He has no chance, and he does anything good, then it's a negative. You're going down.
I experience that a lot.
Yeah, so it's more like thinking, this is the gray area podcast. It's more of that gray neutral area thinking. Of like, I'm doing really good, but he can do just as well. And it's trying to live in that gray area that I've been trying to focus on more, and that's helped a lot. But yeah, when you ride super low or super high, it's just tough. It's tough to be successful, I think.
100%. And those moments will shift in a fight. And if you're not in the right psychology for that, I've seen people go in overly confident all the time. And like you said, the opponent has a little bit of success that shouldn't even matter. Maybe they stopped one takedown, which should mean nothing. You should go right back up, throw a combination again, and take him down. But it begins to like have a domino effect that makes people fall apart.
Well, maybe they did nothing and you're just getting booed and you feel like, oh, I have to do something. I've experienced that. They're trying to boo you out the gym and you're like, I'm winning. I'm dominating this guy. What am I doing wrong? And then then it messes with your brain. Then you're trying to figure out. So
I think you actually touched on something that's really intelligent, of just not making it all matter so much. I mean, that's a really simple way to look at it, because there isn't correlation that can be directly, like, you can't say if you feel bad, you're going to perform bad. If you feel good, you're going to, if you tell yourself all these positive things, you're guaranteed a successful outcome. If you're really, you're not.
Yeah, not even that. You can't even tell yourself, if I train this many times a week, or if I focus on this much that you'll be successful. I watched Bobby out-train I'm positive she out-trained pretty much everyone she fought. And
100%.
She would take losses, or she would.
Mackenzie Dern is a perfect example. Everyone talked about how she's super lazy, didn't really do much, did her own schedule, wouldn't really spar.
Missed weight by 8 pounds.
Missed weight by 8 pounds.
Won the fight.
And Bobby did everything right, sacrificed, ate right, lived her life with incredible discipline to get beat. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I really think you touched on something powerful there. It's like, man, you just can't let those things, they're important. Yeah, it's important to not be negative in your mind. Yeah, it's important to kind of build yourself up a little bit. But don't like build your foundation on that. Because if your foundation's on that, it's just not the reality. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's the hardest part of the sport. The thing that truly separates people at the top is their ability to manage a lot of the things that we can't control. Right. You can control if you show up to practice. You can control if you know. Yeah,
I think mentally everyone talks about it, but it's 80% of the game. Because especially at the highest level, everyone's got the skill, right? Everyone's got the talent. Everyone's got the ability. But if you can't figure it out,
and you can see the people when they are truly clicking in their mind with who they are, like when McGregor was at his best, when Adesanya, they radiated different energy. They show up, and from start to finish, you can see the difference. You can almost see the aura around those people, and then you can also see when it gets shaky. You know what I mean? And then there's a downfall, and then maybe they climb back, maybe they don't. You know, so I mean, it is definitely. I think it's the hardest sport on earth because it's physical combat. It's not where someone shot a ball in a hoop more times or ran. They beat your ass.
It's all parts. Like you get tired in a football game, right? It's like, I got burnt on that play. That sucks. I'm all right. You get tired in a fight, you're getting your head smashed in front of your wife and family and everyone who's watching. And it's crazy because you get tired and you know you're tired. And like some people are really good at faking it, and some people it's like it just compounds how tired they get because they're like, he knows I'm tired. I'm tired. He knows I'm tired. He's going to turn it on. I'm going to get more tired. And it's just like a vicious cycle of this is how his downfall is.
Some people get tired because they worry about getting tired.
Exactly.
I mean, as silly as that sounds. Some people literally are so worried about getting tired that they make themselves tired because they're holding that anxious, like, I can't get tired or I'm going to get beat up. And then they get tired.
Yeah. There's just nothing like it. And I mean, I love the sport and that's part of the reason I love it, but it's unforgiving and it's brutal.
Let's talk about the brand new chapter that's about to open where you become Papa Brundage, the birth of your daughter. When's the due date?
February 24th.
February 24th.
We're just about like one fight camp out. 8 weeks.
Yeah, man. We are 8 weeks away from the fight of your life beginning, which is raising a child in this world correctly. Yeah. That's truly the biggest fight you'll ever go through, you know what I mean? And like try to pass the right information and avoid
It's funny, I was joking with Bobby, like all the questions you get as fighters before your fight, like, are you nervous? Are you ready? Do you think you're prepared? Like, what have you done to get ready? Or like, it's the same questions I have.
Go back to an old interview and just answer it as a baby.
Me for being a parent, but yeah, I don't know. It's scary. It's super scary. But I don't know. It's super scary, but I feel like I've had so many good people in my life, and I've seen so many good parents, and I've been very fortunate that that's been my situation because it's not always the case. But I've had so many good coaches, so many good parents. My family's always been super close, and growing up, I didn't realize how rare that was. I think it was just I took it for granted. I was like, my family is awesome, and this is how every family is, and that's not the case. And, it's sad that that's not the case, but I'm fortunate that that was the case for me. So I have a good base to go off, and not only that, but I have that support to fall back on as well, which is going to be huge, and I'm very thankful for her that she has that, and
And I mean, think about this. Your daughter is going to grow up in a world where her mother and father were professional fighters. The mother is a legend in the Michigan MMA community, the only female to ever get to the UFC ever from Michigan. And the father is a professional fighter who is going to achieve the status of UFC fighter and hopefully top 10 or world champion. What a legacy to come up under. Your daughter's going to be the kid in school that everyone goes like, oh my God, we want to meet your parents one day. You know what I mean? So you're going to already have such a foundation of strength and like you are someone special. Look at your parents. Look at the way that we've lived this life. Not to, again, downgrade someone that's doing a normal 9 to 5 and just kind of.
I just hope it gives her the inspiration that she can do it her way.
It 100% will.
That's the biggest thing I always want her to feel confident in. Obviously, she's going to be very loved, which I'm happy for. But I just want her to know that there's no set way to do things. Sometimes growing up, I always felt like there was a set way. Like, you go to college, you you get the job that you went to college for. You get a house with 2 cars and a wife and 2 kids, and you get a golden retriever, and this is the life you live. And this is a great life, and this is the best life. But this is the only life. And, and that wasn't because that was this is what you have to do, but that's just what I was around. That's what I saw all the time. And so I want her to realize that there's many ways to go through life and be happy, and just that she can pursue any of those routes, and that her parents will be supportive. And, sometimes, like I said, I don't want my fear of her success to hinder her success. Because I think that happens a lot. I think sometimes it's I don't know if you can be successful doing that, so don't try. And that's a scary thing for me, because there's a lot of things I would have missed out on had I listened to the advice of, I don't know if that's smart. I don't know if that's the safe route. I would have missed out on my wife, my daughter, the life I'm living right now, the career path that I've chosen, the amazing people that I've met through this. And so I just want her to always know that, I'm going to support her, and I want her to not be afraid to do the thing that's not safe, or to do the thing that's going to be risky, as long as, she believes in herself. And also realize that shit might not work out. And then you got to pick yourself up and figure it out, because a lot of times that shit doesn't work out, and you got to make adjustments. But I'm excited for her to be able to do that, because I think that's how you evolve and become the person you are. I'm not the person I am because of all the things that went right for me. I'm the person I am because most of the things that went bad, So.
No, that's an incredible foundation. I mean, the amount of people around the world that if they had that type of support system at home, if they were able to witness people with integrity that believed in them and cared about them and told them, you know what, go mess up. Go out there and chase some ludicrous dream and let it not work out. And that's okay. It's actually good for you. It is good for you to chase some crazy passion, and you'll learn about yourself. You'll learn about life. You'll learn about people. You know what I mean? And then it'll help give you a real perspective of what brings me happiness? What do I want out of this experience? What really fills me up? Is it the dollars that go in my bank, or is it the people that I'm around? You know what I mean? Is it the status that I have in society, or is it the way that I'm living? And, like I said, your daughter is going to have a phenomenal foundation because she's witnessing people that aren't preaching the words. Right. They're people that lived those words. So let's talk about your competitive goals. We can't announce what you told me before the podcast, right?
No, can't.
Okay, can't say that. So all we'll say is you've got some big goals for 2021. What do you think 2021 is going to look like for you? Hopefully a lot of this COVID shit's behind us.
Yeah.
As a competitor, you've taken your first loss now as a professional, but you've reframed your perspective on, okay, I know where I'm at. I know what I got to do, and you don't belong in that weight class.
No, yeah. So I'm going to stay I'm going to stay at 185. I'm like I said, I'm right in the thick of things. I didn't take too much of a hit to my stock. I got a great management team. I train at one of the best gyms in the world with some of the best 205ers and 85ers in the world, and I'm getting tremendously better every day. I say it's so corny, but I'm always every fight I get so much better, but I do. And I'm fortunate because I've only been in the sport for such a short amount of time that I'm still making monumental gains. I think once you get to a certain point, you're still getting better, but it's not noticeable. Every fight I have, I get more noticeable in my skills and ability. Hopefully COVID's behind us, and hopefully I can't say anything, but big things are coming. I think I'm going to be set up very well in 2021 to achieve one of the goals of being in the UFC. It's not the goal, but it's a goal. So once I get there, I can start working on top 10 in the world, and I'm a super active fighter. I think that's going to play in my favor, especially as they try to get more busy with cards, and with COVID set up a major comeback. So we'll see, but hopefully, fights get super active and fighters are staying super active, because I'm ready to get in there. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good year. My daughter's getting here. That's added motivation. Everyone's like, you more motivated? I'm I'm one of the most motivated people. That. Me and you are cut from the same cloth there, where it's I'm going to be motivated no matter what. But yeah, of course, it's added motivation. I want to give her a good life. My wife will be back training, which is huge for me. I love watching her train. I love, she's the hardest worker I know. So when she's in there, it's hard to slack, which is huge for me. And then, yeah, things will be good. Colin will have a couple fights, and I don't know, I'm a big energy person. When my circle's got good energy going, it's huge for me. And I think 2021 is going to be great energy. 2020 was rough for a lot of people, and I feel for those people. But for my circle and my friends, they just made their shit happen. And I'm fortunate to be surrounded by people that did that, and yourself included, because when you see other people making their shit happen, you want to make your shit happen, and you'll make it. You'll make it work, and hopefully 2021 people kind of realize that this maybe isn't as life-threatening,
apocalyptic, catastrophic.
Yeah. Hopefully people kind of realize like where we're at with the situation, and the reins get loosened a little bit, and we can assume some sort of normality again. It's crazy. We stopped on our way here, and we were gonna get food, and we seen people inside without their mask on, and Bobby's like, "Oh my God, they don't have their mask on." And I'm like, "Isn't it sad that that's the normal now? Like, I can't believe they don't have masks."
Juan and I went to Home Depot today to pick up what you saw out. Well, actually, this podcast. Well, I won't reveal it yet, but what we picked up, and we walked through the whole place, no mask or anything, and we actually got stopped. One of the workers came up, and I'm like, "Oh God!" Me and Juan are loading up the cart, and he comes up and he goes, "Are you James?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "I just want to let you know I really appreciate what you said and what you did. I watched your interviews. A lot of people here actually talked about it. I just want to thank you for what you've done."
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And it was bizarre. I was thinking he was coming up to give us shit about not wearing masks. He shook my hand and said, I want to let you know that I appreciate what you've done, and like a lot of people feel the way that you feel. We just haven't spoken up, but thank you very much."
Yeah, that's what I say. If you have people around you that, are going to make their stuff happen, it's inspiring to other people.
Even though you guys probably thought I was losing my mind during the COVID.
Well, I knew you were losing your mind. I didn't think anything. I knew you were losing your mind, but I had your back. I was like, okay, I get it. I understood it. I know why a lot of people were losing their minds. You're losing everything else. Why would you not lose your mind, right? So, yeah, I'm fortunate, though, that my 2020, other than inactivity, which I think a lot of fighters are dealing with, and part of that was I had a fight scheduled for 6 months, but, yeah, I don't think I could do another year where I fight twice. That's not me. Some people live that life. I'm trying to fight every 2 months. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I have one final question for the podcast. So what is it about you that when you're tired, when you're sore, when you're frustrated, when you're having a bad day, when work doesn't go right, why do you always show up? And on top of that question, how do you always give your best? Because one thing as a coach that I have to try to tap into as much as possible is creating that in people that don't have it, which is very difficult. But there has to be a way that I can, obviously I can inspire people. I can use words to motivate people. But you've always had a certain spirit that it didn't matter if you worked all day in construction, lifting stuff, exhausted. You'd come in, you'd still be in your work clothes. As soon as you threw your gear on and you stepped out on the mats, you were Cody the competitor that was going to give 100% in every round and everything you did until you had to leave. And even if you were going to have, you're tired, you're sore, you're hungry, you're frustrated, you had a bad day outside of the gym, you always just showed up with that type of energy. And as a coach, that's something I go, I have to find a way to replicate that in everybody, because that is when talent meets hard work, you have unstoppable human beings. Yeah. Where does that come from?
I think a lot of it is you got to be thankful. You got to have gratitude. I think a lot of people are entitled. People take the gym for granted. People take their opportunities for granted. And, I never really felt that way. I felt like I was raised that showing up is easy. Showing up's easy. It's the easiest thing you could do, showing up. And then when you show up, if you're a true competitor, if you're one of these people that really wants to make it, the rest will take care of itself. Because if you show up, you're not going to let someone whoop your ass. I knew that. I don't care how tired I was. I don't care how beat down I was from work. I'm not losing. If you beat me, you beat me. But you weren't getting anything. So if I could make myself show up, which I think is easy, I think it's easy to show up. As long as you're thankful and you have respect for the people, your teammates and your coaches, you'll want to show up for them. And I had so much, like I said, I was lucky. I had a lot of expectation, and I wasn't going to let those people down. They did a lot for me. They changed my life. This place changed my life. I was homeless, living in my car, and then my life got changed because I came here. I wasn't going to let those people down, and I was thankful for my opportunity to compete. That was the best part of my day. Come home from work, and I'm tired, whatever, but I wasn't going to miss out on the best part of my day. And so if you can force yourself to show up, it's like if you want to lift weights or whatever, if you just getting there, if you can get there, the rest will take care of itself. If you show up, the rest will take care of itself. Because if you're a real competitor, you're not going to lose. You're going to fight for everything. So if you can get there, the rest will kind of take care of itself, I think.
So you think it's more of the discipline in your character and your habits and making yourself, I'm going to be at practice. I don't care if I'm tired of it. Because like you said, a true competitor at the heart, you're never going to give up rounds. You're never going to just take the time off or be like, I'm going to let this guy whoop my ass in kickboxing. You can't do it. It's who you are. Yeah. So it's more of just the discipline in the way that you're living your life. Say, it doesn't matter if I'm tired. I am going to my academy because that's my goal.
Well, yeah, I think it's and also you got to realize, I don't know when this started happening. I'm not one of these people who's like, my generation, but like, I've realized that people want to be praised for the bare minimum. That's a thing that is going on, and it's tough for me because I'm like, you're doing the bare minimum. Showing up's the bare minimum. If you're not willing to show up, then don't post about how you want to be the UFC champion, or don't post about how you're going to be the top pro in the state, or you're going to be this, because you're not even willing to show up. So, and I don't care. That was always my thing. If you don't want to show up, don't show up. It doesn't affect me. I mean, it can if I'm your teammate, but in the long run, it's not going to affect me. Just don't, like I always said, my whole career, I've always tried to be genuine. The Cody Brundage you see in here is the Cody Brundage you'll see in post-fight interviews, is the Cody Brundage you'll see if we go get a beer at the Pound, is the Cody Brundage that you'll see everywhere. I've always tried to be super genuine. And there were moments in my amateur career in the beginning where I didn't feel like I was genuine, and they're my most embarrassing moments from my whole career. I've gone back and deleted things that I've posted before because I was like, that is not you. That's not who you are. So if you're not even willing to show up, then you have way bigger problems than can I compete, or can I, you shouldn't necessarily be even thinking about fighting if you can't show up. You shouldn't even think about training if you struggle to show up. There might be some deeper things going on, And so, I don't know. I think, that's the bare minimum. It's the easiest thing in the world. It's the bare minimum. It's like when kids used to get paid for making A's and B's, and I'd be like, Mom, he got paid for making A's and B's. My mom's like, good job. That's the expectation. So what do you want from me? If you weren't getting A's and B's, you'd be getting your ass whooped. So I'm like, yeah, well, that makes sense. So I just think you got to have high expectations. Not even high expectations. You just got to have an expectation of yourself. And if you and don't make it too high, because if your expectation is to come in and win everything every single day, it's hard. It's easy to fall by the wayside and be like, oh man, I'm not reaching my expectation. I suck, or then you start to struggle. But if your expectation is show up every day and do your best, that's an easy expectation. That should be the bare minimum. So if you can do that, you'll get better.
I like it, man. I think it's stellar. So we're going to do one final thing. It's the year 2022. It's January 2022.
The world's still
We're still going. The world hasn't been nuked yet. What does your life look like? Because at this point, you have a daughter that's almost a year old. Where are you in your competitive career? Just what does life look like? Because this podcast is going to exist forever. And in January of 2022, I'm going to go back and watch it.
2022, little girl's almost 1. Hopefully her mom's making her return right around that time. We're hoping. We talk about it all the time. She's like, how long do you think it's going to take? I'm like, well, how tough are you?
Bobby is a savage. People have no clue how talented she actually is. I would put my money on her over 90% of the roster when she's in shape and her head is right. She's that good.
Absolutely.
People do not realize how good she is.
I know. She's a killer, and I'm so excited for her to get back. She's awesome, and she's amazing to watch. She trains super hard. She's another one of those just grinds hard, works her ass off, and so it's easy to root for someone like that. Obviously she's my wife. I root for her, but when someone works as hard as she does and is as good a person as she is, it's easy to root for her. So hopefully she's making her return. That'll be right around that time, 2022. I think 8 months we'll give her to get squared away after childbirth, but no longer. If she watches this,
I was going to say,
you better hustle up. No, I'm just playing.
Don't tell her this up front.
Yeah. No,
make her watch it.
Yeah, she'll be making her return. I'm hoping I'm knocking on the door to top 15. I should be able to knock out almost 3 fights by then, and I think I win all 3, and I'm knocking on the door of top 15. Yeah, and then hopefully the world's back and running, and things aren't crazy anymore, and we're getting home and seeing people, and because we miss Michigan, we miss our family, and part of the reason that we want to be in the UFC is, it's our goal, it's our dream. But if I'm in the UFC, I have a lot of free time to be able to fly home. And you're financially well off enough that you can come fly home and see family. And, I want my daughter to be able to see her grandparents quite a bit. And, this is another way that life, meets that expectation of having a close family, even though we're far away. But, that's part of the reason. That's another motivator to make it. So, I think 2022 will be a big year, and hopefully things are back to normal, man. It's crazy to me how different things are just in the last 9 months. It hasn't even been a year, and it's like a whole different world we're living in. So we'll see, but fingers crossed, things get back to normal.
Well, man, it was an honor to have you on today, and I can't wait till the world finds out about what we talked about before the podcast. Super exciting stuff, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So just, stay the course, and somewhere along the line, we're going to do another one. We'll do a follow-up, definitely in 2022, and we'll see where we're at.
Might do a double one with me and Bobby in 2022.
Heck yeah, we're going to sit her right there. We'll have both.
Kingsley right here in the middle.
See, now we're talking. I like that idea. She's in the center, a little booster seat. We got you both on the podcast.
Sure.
Well, man, it's been an honor. We'll wrap this thing up.
I appreciate you, brother.